Hello everyone, and welcome to another entry in our Community Cast series. In this match, we're going to have a showdown between the Vampire Counts, who are going to be led by Spaniard, and the Dwarves, who are going to be led by Romulan Dog. So without further ado, let's jump right into this match and have some fun. So for the forces of the Vampire Counts, it looks like we're going to have the dreaded double Black Coach. And as much of a joke as the Black Coach was in Warhammer 1, it's actually not bad in Warhammer 2, and it definitely has a bit of a niche against the Dwarves. So yes, it does do magic damage, so the Dwarves are going to get 25% reduction against its damage, but aside from that, it's still pretty damn good. It's mobile, it has really good armor piercing. You can see here it has 90 armor piercing damage out of its 120, and also has a bonus for its infantry of 20, which is quite fat. They're definitely quite powerful in that respect. But again, it's also mobile, it does armor piercing. It's going to be a little bit tricky for things like Slayers to keep up with the 78 speed, and has enough mass to usually escape. I think the Black Coach is actually a pretty good choice here. For the front line, it's going to be all Graveguard with great weapons with the exception of one standard group here in the middle. So it looks like he just wanted to, or maybe he was a little bit short on money or something. But nonetheless, Graveguard with great weapons, not a bad choice. Bonus for his infantry. They have good armor piercing. Their combat stats are a little bit low, but nonetheless, you need some AP here in the front line against the Dawi. So, I mean, there's a couple ways you can play this matchup with the Vampire Counts. You can go with like a ton of chaff and skeletons and then use like Vargulfs and monsters and things like that and cycle charging with Cav. But I think having the Graveguard with great weapons is going to be relatively reliable. A couple groups of Fellbats as well. Fellbats are always a pretty good choice against Dwarves. They can disrupt missiles, artillery pieces, but more importantly, they also shut down gyrocopters. So oftentimes, for example, if there's like two gyrocopters with brimstone guns, just kind of sitting on a Black Coach or just shooting whatever they please, it can be tough for the Vampire Count. So just bringing Fellbats is just very cost effective. And if you are playing Vampire Counts against Dwarves, I highly recommend it. On top of that, he does have a Necromancer down here, so it looks like the Necromancer is going to be a mana battery. He has no spells. He simply has the Forbidden Rod, which he'll be stroking, I'm sure, to get some Winds of Magic. And over here, we do have the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord. So this guy is, he's a pretty good assassin. I mean, he has the Helm of Discord, which is very powerful. All those annoying notifications are always a good time. 27 melee defense, 26 melee attack, and yeah, he's just a beast. I mean, he does have Wolfric the Wanderer syndrome a little bit in that his overall armor piercing compared to his just main values isn't that good, but he's still a very good assassin. He does have the, what is it called? The heart piercing? I think he has that somewhere. Maybe he didn't bring it. Maybe just the Helm of Discord, but nonetheless, a pretty powerful lord with that AoE debuff there. Black Coach, more Fellbats. That's pretty much it. Doesn't look like he has any Black Knights or any Cav. And for the forces of Romulan Dog, it looks like he does have miners here in the front line in a very, very heavy ranged army. So a ton of Rangers. I'm not sure if these are going to be the Bugman's Rangers, but nonetheless, they can usually fight off zombie summons. They're pretty independent, and arrows do pretty good against Vampire Counts normally. But sometimes you see things like big monsters, Vargulfs, Mortis Engine. So it doesn't look like they're going to have too many juicy targets here. So he's got a massive missile force. He does also have the Altar's Raider, so he's able to use the Marks by Altar here, which is going to lower the armor, I believe, missile resist, as well as missile parry for units with shield. So if there's like the Sternsman or something, you can lower that. And in the back, it looks like he does have Slayers. He has Dragonback Slayers, another group of Slayers, and a Rune Lord. Rune Lords with the Rune of Wrath and Ruin are so cost effective. I mean, I think they cost like 800 or 900 gold. They allow you to go so wide, and the Rune of Wrath and Ruin is one of the best tools at taking down Graveguard. So without further ado, guys, let's get this show on the road. So yeah, as far as the army goes, it looks like it's just going to be Dwarf Warriors, a couple groups of Longbeards with great weapons, just a massive Ranger force with the Altar's Raiders. Wow, looks like he does have like 4 or 5 of those guys in total. Are they all Rangers? Looks like Rangers, and yeah, so 5 Rangers and the Altar's Raiders here. Pretty beastly stuff. 3 Slayers in the back are going to have their work cut out for them. They're definitely going to be having to chase those Black Coaches in circles for quite some time there, so that should be quite some fun. Fellbats for the Vampire Counts can definitely do some disruption on the missiles, but it looks like the miners are going to be scooting forward to do a little bit of a... But they don't actually have blasting charges, so maybe they're just going to be the sacrificial lambs here for the initial Black Coach charges. Like, for example, if the Black Coach were to charge these miners and, take the bait here, all those Rangers could just unleash on it. So I think that's what Romulan Dog was trying to do there. In the back, you can see there actually are the Feasters in the Dusk down here in the low ground for Spaniard, so it looks like he's going to be ambushing. These guys can tear up Rangers pretty quick. I mean, if, pretty good weapon strength and decent combat stats, 33 and 35 for their melee attack and melee defense. So Vampire Counts are just going to be getting a bit of a surround, moving up their Fellbats, moving up the Black Coaches here. Romulan Dog and his missile battery. Oh, that looked like a ballista shooting or something, but yeah, those are just arrows. And the Fellbats, very apt, they're able to dodge those things there. So the missile units might be falling back here. I wonder if they're going to fall back before the ranks. I think they're just going to wait for the Vampire Counts to advance. The Graveguard do have some armor. They obviously have 90 armor, so standard, missile core or bolts aren't really going to do a ton of damage. But with that volume of fire, I mean, some focus fire could easily melt one of these guys. They don't have any shields, so the damage is still going to go through in a large way. So now the Graveguard with great weapons are going to be advancing. I think he's comfortable knowing his Black Coach is here, and the other one on the far side, or no, looks like he's just kind of buying time for the Feasters. This is actually a really nice looking map, like just like the landscape and everything. And for multiplayer, I guess it's not bad either. Anyways, the Black Coach here is going to be scooting up the front. So one is going to be going right up the pipe. I wonder where the Runesmith is going to go. He's probably going to drop it on the the Graveguard with Great Weapons are probably one of the bigger threats. I mean, Slayers should be able to maybe shut down the Black Coach. So the first Black Coach is shutting down here. Some Quarrels going down here on the Graveguard with Great Weapons. And it looks like this guy's, he's on a mission. This guy, he's going full on John McClane there, going down there to Rune of Wrath and ruin those guys. Other Black Coach come in, some Graveguard up on the high ground. And yeah, just kind of a posturing game at this point. Vampire Count's playing a very, very patient game. Obviously, they want to get everything in position. I think it's definitely a tough matchup for the Vampire Counts, who are arguably one of the best factions in the game. But the Dwarves do have a good matchup versus them. I think the Dwarven infantry are pretty resilient against the fear and the terror and things like that, and they have good leadership. And yeah, the missile units are really good at picking apart the Vampire Count specialist unit. So on the low ground, it looks like Romulan Zog is going to be doing some light skirmishing here with the Bugman's. So he does have one group of Bugman's Rangers, it looks like. I did miss those guys. And these guys are one of the, probably, in my opinion, one of the best units on the Dwarf roster. I mean, they just have such good combat stats in melee. They have really good missile pressure. They heal themselves, which is always useful for an already very stalwart faction, right? So I like Bugman's Rangers quite a bit. He's going to be moving forward and poking the Vampire Counts. Ooh, a nice volley right there. Actually does a ton of damage to those Fellbats and actually gets through into the Graveguard. So one of those Bugman's Rangers definitely drank his brew there. But in the meantime, Vampire Count's still posturing a little bit, and we will fast forward as they get in position. Obviously, he's just waiting for the Feasters in the Dusk to get in the back, and I do not blame him. So the forces of the Vampire Counts finally moving forward here. It looks like the final pincer move is on. The Feasters in the Dusk have been discovered. Oh, that is really unfortunate. So now Romulan Zog, if he does indeed kind of pay attention to this part of the minimap, is going to see these guys are here and can easily shut them down with some Dwarf Warriors. That is definitely a tough situation. The Graveguard here are going to be advancing, and they're taking massive damage from the throwing axes of the Dawi. The Altar's Raiders just tearing these guys to shreds. That is pretty nasty stuff. They're down to very, very low percent there. The Black Coach coming in and running over some of those Dwarf Warriors, getting a little bit of value, but for the most part, losing that Graveguard group, that was so damn fast. Fellbats are going to be landing right here on top of the Rangers, and the other Fellbats are probably going to be swooping in as well, just in timing with the frontal charge. Some of these miners do muck up the charge a little bit, but the Black Coach is coming in, and it looks like it's out for blood. So the Black Coach pouring through the front line. Longbeards with Great Weapons do have charge defense against large, which is definitely very cool. And it looks like the Graveguard are going to be storming in as well. So it's definitely going to be very important in this match to keep an eye on the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, who's a little bit off, because he's going to be potentially just hunting the Rune Lord the entire game. But wow, this Black Coach got put in a trash can. I wish we saw that. That was so damn fast. So those Slayers must have been just tearing it to shreds while it was taking massive volley fire from the Altar's Raiders. I have a feeling that Romulan Dog did indeed mark it. So my apologies for missing that, but man, that Black Coach just got annihilated right there. So the other Black Coach is just being focus fired, and yeah, even though you have armor, I mean, it doesn't mean a whole lot here. The 60 armor from the Black Coach is just being wasted by the Ranger focus fire. Those guys doing a ton of work. Who needs Quarrelers when you can just like mass focus fire with Rangers, right? Or not Quarrelers, but Thunderers. The Bugman's Rangers are fighting in the front line a little bit against some of these Fellbats. The Graveguard here taking the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Yeah, I mean, they're holding relatively well, but again, the Dwarves with the Longbeards, with the Great Weapons, and all this focus fire, man, they're just burning down this Black Coach. That is so brutal. I mean, that is a lot of the Vampire Count's army. Black Coaches do cost quite a bit, and, it's going to be really tough for them losing that this early in the game. In the meantime, the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord is kind of fighting some of these Longbeards. A pretty good rear charge here from the Vampire Counts, kind of potentially breaking off these Longbeards before the Black Coach falls. Necromancer here helping out in melee as well. And also, he does have Graveguard fighting against Slayers, which is very cost-effective. The Slayers have very low armor piercing value, so they are going to struggle against these guys, and they also do have a bonus for his infantry, which is going to be very helpful. In the middle, it looks like the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord has been marked by Ulthar, and it looks like he's going to be trying to go after the Rune Lord. He's trying to push through, but the Raiders here kind of holding him back a little bit. The Rune Lord's just waddling through the zombies. Now there's a lot of focus fire coming in, so just look at that arc of fire on those Rangers, just getting a ton of value, picking apart the Vampire Counts relatively efficiently, and it also does look like the Slayers are going to be piling in to kind of pin down these Blood Dragon Vampire Lord. In the back line, all the Rangers are pretty much online. The Feasters in the Dusk have been just fighting these Dwarf Warriors into the sunset. I mean, it's just like a slobber knocker down here. The Dwarf Warriors at about 40%, but Feasters in the Dusk might actually, I think they'll probably win it due to the poison and just their combat stats being so much better. But, this is a really good trade for the Dwarves here. I mean, these guys might even start crumbling. And any focus fire from these Rangers is going to be able to temporarily shut those guys down. If we take a look at the big overall battlefield right here, you can see the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord is still, putting up a decent fight in the front line. Longbeards are holding, Miners are holding surprisingly well, up to a whopping 5 kills, which is definitely pretty good. There are some Dragon Black Slayers in reserve as well, and the Dwarfs just have so many missile units. On the low ground, though, the Graveguard are kind of pushing through, and if they're able to kind of get up here and collapse this part of the formation, start pushing upwards, that could do a bit of disruption. Excuse me, a bit of disruption right there. These Graveguard with Great Weapons here kind of sitting a little bit idle. It'll definitely be very useful to see those guys pile in, and it looks like the Vampire Count player does give them the order. Now, Romulan Zog was ahead pretty handily in the bounce of power, but it is kind of normalizing a little bit. It seems that the Dwarf front line, he's having to throw Slayers in the front line, so His Longbeards on a lot of his traditional troops are getting a little bit buckled down here. You can see these miners are folding. When you have to start sending Slayers in to fight like armored infantry, that is not a good situation. But Romulan does respond with the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, which is a really good choice. It's going to slow them, allow them to be more efficiently picked apart by these Rangers. But still, that's a lot of armor-piercing great weapons back there. And you can see the Vampire counts are normalizing the bounce of power. And the Rune Lord, I mean, you know, that Blood Dragon Vampire Lord is going to be quite a menace against that Rune Lord. And if you look at the army, for example, if the Slayers all get taken out, even though, like, he needs the Slayers, essentially, is what I'm saying, to take out this Blood Dragon Vampire Lord. Looks like the Helm of Discord has been popped, so release the notifications. The Necromancer is going to be piling forward as well, and you can see here the Slayers are fighting pretty hard in the pit, but yeah, these Graveguard with great weapons just trading so efficiently, and Slayers are not a cheap unit. And if they're having to fight against an armored unit, it's going to be an extremely cost-inefficient trade, as I did state before. The Feasters in the Dusk also collapse in the back, so suddenly the Vampire counts are back in this game. I do not know how that is possible. They just took such a hammering in the beginning, but their resilience just kind of really playing in here. And it looks like the Dragonback Slayers are going to be charging down, but they just like ran, did you guys see that? They just ran like straight through those Graveguard right there, trying to bum rush the hill right here, but these Graveguard look like they're going to be dissipating, in, as well as the Feasters in the Dusk. But nonetheless, Vampire counts are kind of creeping back into this game a little bit. You can see the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord is on the hunt. He's just going after the Rune Lord. So this is where the Rune Lord is going to suffer compared to someone like Uncle Gromby or Ungrim. Like Ungrim would be able to karate chop and put up a good fight here, right? He would probably win simply because the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord didn't seem to bring his heavy duelist abilities. He just went very cheap and very wide with his army. But the Rune Lord's going to have to run a little bit. The Ulthar's Raiders are in melee here. You can see the Rangers are in melee, and it suddenly looks like the Vampire counts are in a very commanding position here in this game. You can see the Dragonback Slayers and the Rangers here are just trying to find a home, but they're just being chased by the Graveguard with great weapons. And obviously, they are pretty good melee, like I said, but their armor-piercing values are very low. So just this steady, kind of progressive armor here of the Vampire counts is just wearing on the Dwarves formation. And most of their armor-piercing troops, including their, I think he had like 3 or 4 groups of Longbeards, are just offline for the most part. So the Rune Lord's trying to fight here in the pits. Bounce of power pretty heavily in the Vampire count's favor. Rangers are falling back a little bit, but they're being chased everywhere they go. And yeah, this is what's really kind of a rough situation. Slayers just being dragged down. The Graveguard are going to be so good against the Dragonback Slayers here. But obviously, you're just going to kind of nip on the armor. You can see the amount of damage they're taking is very, very minimal there. The Feasters in the Dusk are able to get on some of these Rangers over here, and the Rangers probably will be able to beat those guys, but I just think the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord is going to win the game. And it's not like that he's done a ton this game, but he's just kind of lasted, right? He's just been around, he's been a perpetual nuisance, and he's going to be able to just really drag down this Rune Lord, who is waddling. He has no way of getting away, really. I mean, normally you can run back to your Slayers and other elements, but now that the Dwarf army is getting a little bit thinned out, there's not too much to run back to. So the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord on his horse does have 66 speed against the 32 of this mighty, proud Dwarf Lord. The Helm of Discord going down, doing some pretty good work, putting the combat stats down to 0 and 0. So really, literally the minimum chances to hit and the minimum chance I guess for your opponent to hit you, whatever. You guys get what I'm saying. But yeah, looks like it's going to be army losses. So I can't believe it. The Vampire counts came back that game. I mean, they lost 2 black coaches right out of the gates, which is pretty much like, close to 2,000 gold is gone. And I mean, it literally did nothing. Those black coaches maybe killed like 5, 10, 15 Dwarf Warriors in total. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at the kill count there. So very well played to both players. That was a great game. Spaniard definitely, I mean, I can see how like when a lot of players would lose their 2 black coaches like that, would just be like, oh god, it's done, screw this. Like things can start to fall apart a little bit, but he stayed really kind of resilient there. He just kept pushing in with those Graveguard, and yeah, I mean, ultimately it worked out quite well. So yeah, it was definitely, I mean, I like the black coaches quite a bit against Dwarves, and I know I talked them up quite a bit in the beginning. I think they're a very good choice, but yeah, I mean, they just got focused down so damn hard. I think on the one that did attack from the low ground there on the side of the battlefield, I think there was, yeah, that one probably should have came from like a higher angle because the Ulthar's Raiders were in range. I think they just chewed it apart super quick. But yeah, I still think the black coaches are a really good pick. I mean, you need a little bit more stopping power other than just Graveguard. In the rules of the tournament, I don't think you can bring, because this was actually a tournament game, I don't think you can bring more than 6 of the Graveguard with great weapons, or 5 or 6 or something. But I also do like that he brought the shielded variant. It does give him some flexibility if it does get into a really long grindy game. The Rangers, I guess, are going to have to shoot shielded targets, which I think actually played a factor there at the end in terms of his overall durability. The Feasters in the Dusk unfortunately got shut down, but those guys tried. The angry little golems fought to the death against those Dwarf Warriors, which is always a good time. But yeah, it was a good build, and honestly, I really liked Romulan's build. I felt like it was solid, it was well-rounded. A lot of Vampire counts players, like I said, are going to be using Vargulfs and black coaches and things like that, and he obviously had answers for both of those. Had Spaniard gone with, the Vargulfs or any sort of other Gulf or monster, they would have been gunned down by this like firing line, right? That is so much stopping power, but yeah, he just ultimately lacked armor piercing in the front line, right? Like he had a couple groups of Graveguard, or not Graveguard, where are those guys? Did he have any of the great weapons? Yeah, he had 3 groups of Longbeards with great weapons, but they weren't able to stand up to the 4 the Graveguard with great weapons, as well as the healing with Invocation of Nehek and things like that. But I mean, it could have. I mean, there was a couple small moments I think in which the game could have gone a little bit different, but obviously, you know, the Vampire Counts were able to just out attrition them there. So very well played about Spaniard as well as Romulan Dog. That was an amazing close game. This was the first time I watched a replay. I decided to just jump in and cast this one without looking at the outcome. So I really thought it was over. I was like, wow, this one's going to be like a 4 or 5 minute game. It looks like the Dwarfs are just going to run them over. But no, I can't believe the Vampire Counts came back. Very well played to both players. Hopefully you guys enjoy this community cast. We will see you guys next time. Take care.